Hey, hello. We have another live session, Ask Me Anything. Yeah, actually, Ask Us Anything, because there are 3 people today instead of 2. Instead of typically me and Darin, right? We have a special guest, which is Anton, right? Anton, there it is. There's Anton, right?
Yes.
And the goal today is to, at least general goal is to talk about infrastructure and services. How do we manage infrastructure? How do we manage services and so on and so forth? That does not mean that you cannot ask other questions outside of that scope. You can, we might or might not answer, we'll see. Now, Anton, you want to introduce yourself?
Well, yeah, of course. Why not? I think it's important that people know what kind of stuff I can talk about. So my name is Anton Babenko, and for the last 5 years, I've been having fun with infrastructure in Terraform and AWS. And I also like to sometimes automate something what is not supposed to be automated. And one of my recent hobby is to ask strange questions like, why do you do this? What kind of things did you try to accomplish? And I'm really surprised when I manage to convince people to kind of think critically about their decisions. So yeah, hopefully today we will have some of these discussions going. So don't hesitate to ask me anything about Terraform, AWS, infrastructure, maybe even DevOps, who knows? So yeah.
Nice. So let me give a very quick introduction, how I see the history of infrastructure management and services. Anton, if I say something that you disagree, interrupt me immediately, right? I might be wrong. We are all we have all different views. So long time ago, most of us managed the infrastructure and services by SSHing into a cluster, right? You get a server, you put it into a rack. It usually comes already with some OS installed, and then you SSH, and then you do random things manually. Then we got CF Engine, and further on, Chef and Puppet. They all changed how we do stuff. And it changed it by allowing us to do more or less to define things in more or less declarative format, and then either apply those things directly from our machines or have some kind of a server type of setup where, let's say, Puppet would be pulling manifests from some repository and then applying them continuously, right? Or looking for changes, looking for drifts, and applying them. And further on, we got Ansible, similar concepts. All those until Ansible, there are others as well, at least from my perspective, were designed to work primarily with mutable infrastructure, mutable services, meaning that, hey, here's a server, I'm going to provision it, I'm going to install whatever it needs to be installed, update, delete, do whatever we want to do, right? Further on, we moved into, not moved, that's the wrong word, we got, right? Because for some people, solutions from the past are still the best solutions, for others are something else, right? But further on, we got the tools like Terraform, and further on Pulumi, we got Salt and a few others, and they're already leaning towards immutable infrastructure, cloud infrastructure. Cloud infrastructure by definition is, I'm not going to say immutable, but more immutable than what we had on-prem later. And they are basically, that would be the major differentiator between conceptually, right? Between what we had in the past, what we have with Terraform, Pulumi, and a few others. Apart from obvious, like, hey, Terraform allows us to define in declarative format, Pulumi allows us to write code, and now we're getting, I'm not going to say next generation, but we're getting different types of tools that are relying on Kubernetes. That would be, oh, my mind, I forgot now the names. Like AWS has CDK, right? Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
we have Crossplane.
AWS has so many different options, but probably you're talking about CDK. Yeah.
Nobody can follow, exactly. But anyways, we are getting also infrastructure as code managed through some type of control planes running in Kubernetes. Again, not saying what is better, what is worse, but kind of that's a very brief overview of what we got last 20-something years or something like that. And now comes the time with questions, right? And we can, I think that Darin is going to start.
Let me just add a little bit clarification to what you
Sure.
explained to put everyone on the same perspective. I have been once to data center in my life, and I got called after that. That's only experience which I have with data center. So when people talk about how we used to have certain things, how we used to put cables into something, I am not that kind of guy. I have never had any experience. I mean, of course, I can set up printer, but that's the only thing where I can sometimes insert cable. In all of my career, I don't have so much legacy. So I started with infrastructure as code being almost given for us. I mean, okay, it was 2016 or 15, so we didn't have so well-known notion of infrastructure as code. But I want to say that not everyone used to work in data center, and not everyone was pretty much familiar with how even operation system or sysadmin work supposed to be happening. So we have pretty big gap between something what we had many years ago and something what we have now. And the CF engine was one of these things which is actually made by guys here in Oslo. So it's our kind of local famous product, same as Varnish. So yeah.
So you're lucky, you're blessed that you could you could skip some of the years of misery, right?
Yeah.
And then jump into new years of misery, whatever they are.
Yeah. Exactly. Right.
How familiar are you with supply chain monitoring?
Well, not so much, but I could Google what is Graefas. Does it count?
Yeah, the reason why I'm asking how familiar you are is because that's not the domain of my expertise. Maybe Darin, you must be a supply chain monitoring person. No, we have a huge gap now here in our collective knowledge. Okay, let's leave this. Kingalok. I'm terrible with pronouncing names. I'm going to write this down and get back to you. Okay, explore it in more detail. When can we expect any standards for GitOps similar to DevOps? No, this is the first time that I hear that there is a standard for DevOps, to be honest. That does not mean that there isn't one.
Sorry, there is working group for GitOps.
No, yeah, for GitOps there is, but for DevOps is so broad that it can be almost anything. I cannot imagine how we would even get to any standard. For GitOps, yes. So I would kind of like turn it around. Whether we're gonna get anything for DevOps anytime soon is questionable. I would say even impossible. But yes, as Anton said, there is a GitOps working group. Actually, there are at least two that I know of. I will find the link and post it here while we are.
I posted link to GitOps working group in YouTube. I don't know if I was successful or maybe it will be removed.
Yeah. Darin will find it out, I think.
Okay,
yeah, cool. Links get removed in YouTube. I don't know what YouTube is doing. What challenges an organization will face when migrating from DevOps to GitOps? Apart from technical, do you see any cultural changes? Do you want to go with that one, Anton?
Well, yeah, this is two different things. So it's like, it's just impossible to compare, I would say.
Because it would be the same. You could say the same thing equally incorrectly. Challenges migrating from DevOps to CI/CD or from DevOps to anything. All those. DevOps is a very broad cultural change where operations and development are working together, and that means that if they're working on everything related to operations and applications and so on and so forth, that means that GitOps could be, from some perspective, considered a subset of DevOps, just like CI/CD could be considered a subset of DevOps, and containers and cloud and so on and so forth. So GitOps is a very technical practice. There is a process. There are tools. We follow those processes. We follow those rules, give or take, and we get GitOps. DevOps is a cultural change. It's about acknowledging that we cannot do operations effectively, especially at scale, without really writing code, and also acknowledging that development teams working on applications cannot continue working without having any notion of operations. At least that's my definition of it, right? So very different things, cultural versus technical, one being potentially a subset of the other.
Yeah, or as I usually like to think about DevOps when someone asks me and I don't have all time in the world to answer, I tend to simplify things by saying that DevOps is two things. I mean, it depends who is asking. If you are curious about culture, then fine. DevOps is collection of culture plus tools. It's like 50-50 change, 50-50 split. And in this regards, we can probably put GitOps under tools category. I completely understand that I'm talking bullshit for most people who are able to sell DevOps in their organization right now, but that's just my simplification of understanding of what is DevOps.
Oh, before we go to the next question, let me very, very briefly do the thing. Please like this, subscribe, and if you want to support the channel, please consider joining the channel. It's like price of a coffee, one coffee a month, and it helps a lot to keep the lights on. So please consider joining, and you know what to do with subscribe and like and all those things. And one more thing, last thing. Tomorrow is live chat only for members of the channel, right? So members of the channel already got the invites, those at big supporter or something like that tier. So if you're one of the members here, you should come tomorrow to the live chat, informal chat. Now, let's go back to the questions. You want to give a shout at this one? There's the word Terraform there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we are currently using AWS Control Tower to manage different resources. Should we use Terraform? Well, so my experience with Control Tower and Terraform is rather limited because, first of all, it is a rather big service to manage. So a lot of people who I know, they came up with their unique solutions to tackle this problem. So there is no single module which you can just use, and then suddenly you will have everything created. So historically, this was implemented mostly not in Terraform, but in CloudFormation and recently in CDK. Though you can always use Terraform, but most likely you will be the first one to implement this. So I would not be so stubborn and just use Terraform because, well, you have to use Terraform. Be open and look into using CDK constructs for specifically AWS Control Tower. Resource of this service in Terraform is also rather limited from what I experienced, and I just checked it a couple minutes ago, and I don't see it moving forward so much. So most likely you can do everything with Terraform, but you will have to do a few hacks by invoking some CloudFormation templates or by shell scripts. It's probably not what you want to do. If you want to do, go ahead. You will have some experience, and then you can write blog post about it. For many, that's a good achievement, but most likely your company will not appreciate it.
Okay, at present, Rancher Desktop doesn't support multi-node Kubernetes cluster. Is there any option for multi-node Kubernetes cluster with nerdctl and containerd support on Mac? I don't know of any, to be honest. The only multi-cluster solutions that I know for running Kubernetes locally would be Minikube. Minikube supports, actually, Minikube does, yeah, Minikube does support multi-node cluster now, but it doesn't work with nerdctl, at least not that I know. Or maybe it does. I haven't tried it, to be honest. And then we have Kind, which works, as far as I know, only in Docker Desktop. So you would need to stick with, let's say, Docker Desktop and Kind, but then you don't get containerd directly. if someone would like to push for Crossplane to provision infrastructure in multiple AWS accounts, how can we go and boil the frogs? So with Crossplane, you can create provider configuration, right? And that provider configuration contains the credentials to, in this case, to AWS, right? Or whichever provider you're using. And you can have as many provider configurations as you want, right? Because each of those configurations have a name. So you name a configuration, say, I don't know, AWS account 1 config, AWS account 2 config, and so on and so forth. And then later on, when you create your Crossplane resources or compositions or claims or whatever you're doing, you can actually explicitly say which provider config to use. So yes, the answer is yes. Here's a question. When is the DevOps industry going to settle so we have standards and not 1,000 tools and domain-specific languages? Oh, you want to do it or shall I do it?
Well,
we're going to be negative, I suspect.
I don't think it is possible. I mean, I wish we have some sort of standard and none of us talk about infrastructure and we just deliver value and, I mean, maybe write some code to just deliver value. But I don't think it happens in the near future. And I don't think actually there is enough incentive for pretty much anyone to make things so simple.
I mean, you know, the way I see it, DevOps is just a mesh of every single tool putting a DevOps sticker. But literally, if you go to, I would bet right now, if we spend some time to evaluate 100 random products, we would see that 80% or 90% of them have a DevOps somewhere, something, right? So it's not a thing, really. DevOps is not a thing, at least from technical perspective. It's just a mishmash of random stuff that providers are trying to sell you. Again, what we said before, it's a cultural change, really, and literally any tool, Terraform, Ansible, Pulumi, Crossplane, AWS, I don't know, Kubernetes, Docker, everything is DevOps. So there is I cannot imagine having a standard of something that includes everything.
Well, I can imagine one thing, that instead of focusing on individual tools, we may have some notion of platform where introducing new tools is quite simple, so that we have some sort of platform where we say login, but we don't care how login is implemented, whether there are Prometheus or something else is used. So this case, that's the only way where I can see that we don't have 1,000 tools. Well, we have 1,000 tools, but we don't see them so much. But again, this is just in my dreams. I don't have any specific information where this is even possible.
That's something similar to, let's say, open telemetry, right? That brought standards into telemetry. But it's not really that you can... The problem I have with that is that I cannot qualify it as as DevOps standard, right? Mm-hmm. There are standards and there will be new standards for this or that, many different things. But they need to be more focused than saying DevOps, right?
Yeah. Well, this is a pretty interesting question. Why inspec not very popular for infrastructure testing? So when I read this question for the first time, I was like thinking, is this a kind of guy who read specification or tried this tool, and he also think that this tool is exactly what we need for testing? Well, I was, and I probably is still this kind of guy who think that inspec is one of the best tools for infrastructure testing because it does the job well and it hides a lot of complexity which we don't need to know about. The reason why inspec is not very popular right now is probably like two reasons. One is none of us, put it this way, like answering previous question, there is no standard for what does infrastructure testing mean. I mean, yes, we can agree that there are certain things, but each of these tools, which we know out there, treating infrastructure testing differently. And inspec is quite good for certain things when you have already spent, like in my case, I spent 3 days clicking around, writing some controls, and then I was happy. But in general, starting point is rather high still for that. So we will see some changes in infrastructure testing. I hope in half year, well, maybe more, from big players like HashiCorp, as well as from other organizations and individuals, because it is a very hot topic. I don't think inspec will be taking the lead here. Why? Because it's hard.
What is the best way to run monolithic Java apps in cloud nowadays? Something except beanstalk. Okay, either you, Anton, or Darin needs to jump in here. I'm not a Java guy for a while now.
Well, I'm not a Java guy either, but I can just say that if you have monolith, AWS as well as any other cloud provider has about 20 different ways how you can do this. One of the easiest should be to put it somewhere in container, and well, that's it. It's pretty much, it should be also very well described in all getting started guides for many AWS services. Like App Runner is one which comes to my mind. Also, if you are familiar with other, Fargate or ECS or Fargate, you can also run it there. Elastic Beanstalk, if you're referring to this Beanstalk, is almost decommissioned in favor of App Runner by AWS. So I wouldn't start anything in Beanstalk right now. But again, I wouldn't start Java at all.
But it was a big problem. I remember years ago when JVM was not aware of running in a container, right? And then it was just doing silly stuff, thinking that it can occupy the whole server and stuff like that. To my knowledge, that was the last big obstacle from Java running in a container, and that's solved for years now, right?
Yeah.
JVM is aware of containers, or it doesn't think that it's occupying the whole server, and there shouldn't be any problem really from running it, right? Whichever technology you use, especially if it's in containers.
Yeah.
Okay, the Apple M1 laptops were released recently, and many firms are buying those devices, me included. What is your experience with setting up a local development environment based on Docker on this kind of device? So Docker desktop works like a charm on M1. I haven't had any issues with it, apart from the issues that exist before M1, like mounting volumes and things like that. Now, the real question is, when will the rest of the tooling, like Rancher Desktop, what else do we have? Podman and a few others work well in M1. They do not work well yet, but they will. So I'm looking forward to Rancher Desktop, for example, doing everything it needs to do on M1. And I think that we are really, really close to that. But until then, Docker Desktop works just fine.
Well, this says, can we replicate a new read replica from an already existing read replica deployed in existing VPC? Well, the answer is probably read documentation. I have not been using this for quite some time. And documentation is, is pretty decent. It will answer exactly whether you can do certain things or not. It's a very tricky question in general. By many reasons. For example, are you talking about Postgres or MySQL? Which version of this? And so on. So it's very hard question to answer in general. So
this one is yours.
Well, yeah, this is pretty cool. What is better, Windows or DirectX? No, okay. CDK or Terraform? Well, actually, yeah. So I have some strong opinions on that, which I probably have to put down a little bit because I'm kind of don't know the whole picture. But for me, there are three products. AWS CDK, Terraform, and CDK for Terraform. Out of these 3 products, I believe into 2. Guess which? Terraform and AWS CDK. Why there are only 2 of these problems, or 2 products? First of all, AWS CDK, which I guess you're referring here, has started because there was problem and there was need for people to simplify their CloudFormation journey. Terraform didn't have issues before. I mean, yes, you can say that you don't like HCL, but that's probably your own problem. Terraform will not help you with simplifying HCL. And then there is a third product which started from thin air, which is Terraform for CDK. I don't understand why this product exists, and I don't really advocate pretty much anyone to spend time on that because it just inherited the same problems of Terraform, same limitations, and well, I don't think it's needed. If you are only on AWS and you already have, let's say, some experience with CloudFormation or with Terraform, then use one of these products. That's it. There is no single solution which I can recommend. I look into AWS CDK from time to time. I like what I see, but at the same time, I have no issues with Terraform whatsoever for the last 3 or 4 years. I have already figured out different hacks, different solutions for it, different workarounds. There are a bunch of different modules available on Terraform AWS modules, for example. Most likely, you can just look into that one and start using. So then the last part here is, do we need to store state, or this is not a deal and we need just take care about the code? Well, if you use AWS CDK, then it is CloudFormation, so you don't have notion of state. You don't have to manage it, at least in the traditional way. And in general, you probably want to care about your configuration or code. So yeah, there are also many different options regarding state. You can use different SaaS options for that, and they can provide state management quite nicely as well.
I think this is kind of like the much broader question than CDK versus Terraform. I see it rather a question of whether we should use programming languages to define the state of, in this case, infrastructure services or declarative format, right? To me, that's the right question. And then once we choose which one of the two fits better, then we go into, hey, okay, so if you're going down that path, should it be CDK or something else? Or if we go into the declarative format, should it be Terraform or something else, right? So it's kind of, that would be my first question before we go into CDK or Terraform. The format of, not even specific format, I'm not even saying YAML or HCL, declarative or imperative. That's the question.
Yeah,
and I have very strong opinions, but I don't want to troll here. Or we can do it. What do you prefer?
I completely agree with this question, which has to be answered first. So it's my bad that I didn't ask it myself. But I also like to ask people another question. With which approach do you expect to have less challenges? If you go with any of these solutions, they are not hiding the underlying tool which is used. Let's say CDK still use CloudFormation. So if you know CloudFormation, you will be in very good shape. Terraform for CDK still rely on internals of Terraform. And what's really important is that all bugs, all features, not features, it's called bugs, all bugs of Terraform are automatically inherited by Terraform for CDK. So the least buggy solution in this case is Terraform. So, well, this is kind of obvious to hear from me, I know, but you're muted.
Sorry. For me, what is curious is that if you go website for CDK or Pulumi or any of the tools that are promoting imperative way of defining infrastructure or services, they always have examples that are mimicking declarative format in a programming language. I don't know if you noticed that kind of. If you go to CDK right now, on the first page, you will see actually that the example is, oh, Nick just subscribed. Thank you, Nick. If you go to CDK, hey, this is declarative format that you just rewrote into TypeScript or JavaScript or whatever. And I really don't understand why such tools do not actually start with examples that are showing the benefits of not using declarative format, if there is such thing.
Well, I think they don't do this because the example will not be so small and will not be so easy to understand.
Fair enough. But still, kind of first context should kind of, when I go there, I want to say, okay, so why would I do this? Why would I use a programming language? Kind of, there should be at least a hint of why.
Yeah.
But anyways, I'm trolling now.
Well, actually, I think Pulumi had this kind of documentation some time ago. I didn't check it recently, to be honest, but they had very clear separation or clear focus. It's like for me, like since 2018, they were focusing on very precise and very problematic area for Terraform people, serverless and Kubernetes. And they said that we have solution for you guys who want to have Kubernetes and serverless managed as a code, but in Terraform it's hard. So here we are. And they showed pretty good examples of how easy or how logical it can be if you use the product. So for me, since 2018 to about 2020, it was one of standard way of thinking, like Kubernetes serverless, Pulumi, everything else, Terraform. But then I wanted to expand it, and I actually wanted to do the same things which is Pulumi doing, but in Terraform. So that's why I came up with different modules for serverless.
Do DevOps use design patterns like software engineers normally do when solving problems? If yes, what are they? Yes, the answer is yes. Even though I don't think that we necessarily call it design patterns, but there was a question, at least one so far, about GitOps, for example. GitOps can be considered a pattern, right? A design pattern. This is how we design the synchronization between the desired state and the actual state, right? It's a design pattern based on pull mechanism, and then you use a tool that will do whatever it needs to do to make that happen. So yes, some patterns are even emerging. You have patterns like that, like GitOps, that starts as a pattern, and then also you have patterns that are emerging from the common formats that we are creating. Like you can in a way consider OpenTelemetry a pattern, right? Or if you talk about logging, for example, let's say in Kubernetes, the pattern is to create a stateful set that will be monitoring every single container running in that server, in each of the servers, and ship it somewhere, right? So that would be yet another pattern. So yes, there are a lot of patterns. Just the DevOps is almost anything. So there are many, many, many patterns, right?
Yeah, and I'd like to add to this from Terraform point of view and from Terraform module specifically. A few years ago, it was big big rethinking of what I was doing after I realized that it's much easier to look at infrastructure as code in Terraform and apply all software engineering patterns which I learned because I was a software developer for pretty much all my career. And it was so easy for me to just understand, well, I forgot all of these names right now, but all names of these patterns. For example, you have module, and this module can be reused multiple times, and collection of these modules can be grouped again. And all of these modules now can be accepting certain things and can output another type of things. And all of this is easier to understand if you know at least some of object-oriented programming or aspect-oriented programming. It is very easy to understand, and that's why a lot of infrastructure development tasks are rather native for software developers. As soon as they understand how their cloud platform works, it's quite easy for them to understand, for example, that there is VPC, which contains something, and then resources belongs to another type of entity, and so on. So it's very easy to talk about.
GitOps and progressive rollout. Do we have any solution for the problem when a progressive rollout fails when using GitOps? Like when canary rollout fails, what happens next? So that's a tricky one. To begin with, I think that progressive delivery tools are not really doing or cooperating well with GitOps in general. Which is kind of strange, because if you go to documentation of Argo rollouts or Flagger from Weaveworks, you will see a lot of times GitOps being mentioned over and over again. And yet, when they roll back, they do not really do that by making any changes to Git. So we are in a kind of a problem, right? Which is not a big problem, because it's a medium-sized problem, let's say, because the manifest that you applied, like Argo rollouts manifest, that still stays the same, because what Argo rollouts does is that changes the definitions below those manifests, the children of that definition of child resources, right? So from GitOps perspective, nothing really changed. Is that just the children did change the release of the child resource. And the weight put on services changed. What would be nice to happen is if progressive rollout tools would actually, instead of rolling back or even rolling forward, would be actually making those changes to Git and then letting ArgoCD or Flux do the rest of the work, which is not yet there. I think, and I might be wrong, that there are plans to do that, at least in Flagger, but I'm not sure how far did those plans progress. Until then, basically, your best bet is to get notification when it's rolled back, and you can do that easily. Kind of, let's say, you can use Argo events, let's say, to get notified when things happen in general, including rollbacks. And then when you figure out what's wrong, why it rolled back, then you really roll forward by making another commit to Git repo. So you have that manual action really of applying those changes or rollback changes or rolling forward by making commits to a Git repo. It's kind of half-baked solution so far, unfortunately.
What's your opinion on cloud certifications? Well, I don't know how many certifications you have, Victor. Do you have any?
I have a few .NET certifications from 30 years ago.
No. You wouldn't get job if you just attach this. This is really one of requirements if you want to get job in some companies, especially if it is a consultant agency, that you have to prove that you know something. I have 6 certifications, and the only reason why I have why I took them, I mean AWS certifications, is because I wanted to learn something. I never met a company who said that we believe in certifications when we hire people, because it's so often when we meet, especially on LinkedIn, where people say that, oh, I passed this certification. Do you know something about this and this and how this has to be architected? No, I don't know. So what's the point of certification? So I only recommend to take certifications if you learn something during the process. And then as an achievement, you can say that you passed the certification.
I almost agree with that. There is another use case. And to me, that use case is the same as the reason why you would go to university and study computer science. When you do not have practical experience, then certifications and diplomas are your only friend, right? So think of it, first job, kind of like, so what distinguishes me from somebody else? Hey, I have certifications, you don't. We both have no experience. So no experience, but one has certification, the other one doesn't. So it's more likely that the one with certification will get that first job, maybe second. But once you have experience, let's say 5 years of experience working in for real, not playing around at home, but working in a company, after that, I cannot imagine. To be honest, if somebody would ask me now on a job interview, do you have certifications, I would probably leave immediately. Kind of like, hey, why would you ask me for certifications after X years of experience? It makes no sense. Because, as you said, certifications are not a replacement for experience in any form of way. But it's good, kind of, if you have nothing else. Let's say that you're studying. Why not?
Yeah, or exactly like my latest case was that I wanted to learn how security works on AWS. And I prepared for AWS security specialty exam. I learned so much, and I didn't use even 5% of what I learned because, I don't need it right now. But it was good for me to be in this mood to learn different things, different features, different patterns, and so on. But again, it's not replacement of experiment. So not experience. So if somebody with even half year of experience compare knowledge to what I got for the certification, then person know much more because that's practical experience. And for many certifications, I mean, I took many AWS and HashiCorp certifications. They are asking questions, not really so much practical. I mean, it's good that you know how to, let's say, set up some crazy things on AWS network, but it's not something what you will have to do. So in many cases, you have to just understand the basic of it, like how things in general work. But practical experience is like 10 times better than any certification.
Yeah, it's going well. Do you need to do anything differently for deploying Git submodule projects with ArgoCD? I don't think so. I mean, as long as you load all those modules, it's the same. Actually, I might need to double check that. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not using submodules really. I really dislike them, so I need to double check before answering this. Unless you know it, Anton.
No, I don't know, but I kind of smile when you say that you don't like submodules. I think submodules were cool in theory. I don't know, like 5-10 years ago, because you have a bunch of different things and they're interconnected. But in practice, using them and updating them and keeping tracks of all of this is a little bit more complicated than most of us want it to be.
Simon, is it a good idea to run stateful middleware DB in Kubernetes like Kafka, Redis, and Postgres? I say yes, but as the last thing you do. Kind of like that's the last thing I would move to Kubernetes. So kind of like, okay, we run everything in Kubernetes. There is nothing else left except stateful stuff like databases. And even then, it depends on which database you're running. There are databases that simply work better than others. There are databases that work horribly bad. Oracle. So it really depends what is the database. Some are better than others, and you need to be experienced with Kubernetes to do that. And at the end of the day, if you have an option to use database as a service in AWS, Azure, Google, whatever you're doing, wherever you're running, then do that. Just kind of one less thing to worry. And that's a big worry over there, stateful, sorry. Is it possible to enable virtualization in macOS? Requirement here is I need to run Android containers with something like Camu help. I mean, a nested I never tried nested virtualization. Did you try nested? I never tried it. I don't know. I'm not even sure why would you need that. Why would you need nested virtualization for Android containers? Again, I'm not a big Android developer, so I don't know, but I haven't tried it. I have no idea.
This is very good question. I don't know where I saw this initial discussion or tweet or something. I mean, obviously, I have no clue who will buy them, but I have gut feeling that it should not happen if we want to live in a better world. That's the only thing which I can tell. But well, VMware. Well.
But if anybody would buy Terraform, Hashi, that cannot be a cloud provider because they're too agnostic to cloud providers, right? So it cannot be Google, Microsoft, Azure.
Well, that's
so
actually
it would have to be.
That's actually quite interesting. Is that some of the recent things which has happened about months ago with AWS control cloud API or cloud control API, which AWS released, and HashiCorp created a provider for that. And there was pretty big discussion in the community, and people said, like, why this is happening? There is big confusion already, and you just add more confusion by doing certain things. And I had an idea that it's actually happening to increase value of other solutions and diminish value of Terraform. So it's like, if I make bad stuff here, then people will not be using us, and people will be using CloudFormation, CDK, or other product by cloud providers. I know it sounds a little bit kind of disappointing and stupid, but I didn't have any other explanation for why this has happened, why the provider was created, and well.
But the AWS is complicated. I think that they also don't know what they're working on and what they're not. Kind of like there is 17 services for the same thing.
Yeah.
At any given moment.
Yeah.
And none of them get deprecated. None of them. It never stops. Kind of like ECS is still alive.
Like, well, actually, yesterday we discussed how many AWS services are out there. I think the answer was about 290 something. And the way how this was kind of discovered is the guy looked into documentation page and get CSS selectors of certain things on the page, and then get unique list of that. So yeah, that's the only way how you can get information about services, and there are a lot of them, including those services which are actually not deprecated officially, but SimpleDB is still there, Mechanical Turk is still there. Yes, you cannot start something, but it is there. Cloud Search is still there. I mean, some people probably didn't even know that AWS had a service specifically for search before they have Elasticsearch and OpenSearch. So yeah, it's a big mess all over. Thoughts on Pulumi? Well, this is I have a little bit of mixed feelings with the whole thing, which like what they do. But I have pretty clear understanding, which I'd like to express, is that when people tell that Pulumi is startup or like Pulumi is new, well, they started 3 years ago. For how long we should call them startup or new or undecided or promising? I mean, for me, it's like either they stay here or they have to pivot and do something else. I still believe that they have pretty good model for like helping people who wants to use Terraform providers, but they want to use programming language, and they have slightly different problems than Terraform. Well, they still have a lot of problems if you go to the GitHub issues, but it's another type of problems. And I know a couple companies who moved from Terraform to Pulumi, And well, they are not having everything so nicely implemented, and they think about Pulumi as the best of the best, but they have something done. So, I mean, overall, I think it's like comparison is totally equal. Of course, if you ask people who are from HashiCorp or from Pulumi, they will definitely tell that their company and their product is the best. But from user perspective, it's the same stuff. I mean, if you have something implemented in one technology, you can do the same in another technology. Yes, you will spend a lot of time. You will find 10 other bugs, and everything will be not working for some time. You will be very upset. You will start thinking about, hey, I want to move back to my previous technology or do something about it. But the same happens with another technology. So, well.
My kind of like beef with Pulumi, I think that Pulumi is great, just to clarify. But the thing is that I think that it started on a wrong foot. I think that Pulumi was not designed to solve management of infrastructure problem in a different way. So it's not a different way to do stuff. It's not a better or worse way. It's exactly the same way as using, let's say, Terraform, just with a different format of the manifest. Now ignoring who has more features, who has more bugs and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it's a new tool that works in the same way as, let's say, Terraform, except that the format is really different of defining something.
Well,
I'm more...
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add and to kind of maybe to slightly change my mind. You see how easy am I? Well, I think that Pulumi is actually getting better and better, taking into account the recent addition and recent acknowledgement that, hey, people would like to not write their stuff. Let's make modules for them. And the release of module catalog, which we had in Terraform for last, since 2017, I guess, is very, very a good addition. So I think they will have significant benefit if they keep investing into reusability of their stuff. So the whole point of what we do with infrastructure is not to learn from the ground up, write crazy code, and then be proud of this crazy code. The whole goal of what we do is just to be able to get our job done with less effort. So go into Terraform registry or go to Pulumi catalog, or I don't know how it's called, and find a specific solution and use it is the right way to do. So Pulumi made very good addition recently. Unfortunately, it took them, 3 years to realize that. But anyway, better late than never.
That's also normal, kind of like, if you compare it with the duration of the existence of Terraform, then it's not slow, right? That realization and that effort. It's a much newer project, so we cannot expect to be on par with what Terraform is doing from the get-go.
Well, but at the same time, we need to understand that Pulumi is not developing everything from scratch. They are reusing Terraform providers. They are watching very closely what's going on in the whole ecosystem. So still, I don't understand why did it take them 3 years to acknowledge that and say, like, okay, now you guys can share your stuff. Isn't it obvious? I mean, we had Ansible Galaxy 10 years ago, right? Or maybe not 10, but 8 years ago. We had Chef Supermarket also, 10 years ago. So all of these solutions existed before. So I still don't understand why it took even 3 years. For me, it should be quite obvious that let's make the job of developers simpler. How can we do this? Well, we have to develop a bunch of different tools for them and allow them to discover their solution. I'm also surprised how many people know that there is such a thing called CloudFormation registry? Probably not many. But you know that you
Personally,
could share.
I would like to forget the existence of CloudFormation.
Yeah, but it will be kind of restored, I would say, for the lack of better word, from the grave.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So very, very quick last time commercial, kind of like, hey, join the channel. Please do that. It really means a lot, and do all the rest of the things you do on YouTube, because we are about to close this session. We have time for maybe one or two, maybe three questions. Depends how fast we talk. And all the questions that we do not answer, I will put it in on a list for the questions, and we are going to go through them in the upcoming sessions, right? So nothing gets lost. We're going through all the questions, just not necessarily in this session. And now let's go through last couple of questions. How far a dev should know about infrastructure and infrastructure as code? In your opinion, what do you expect a developer to know when he or she approaches you with a request to give him a service to be autonomous? Now, I would like to answer this question mostly because, first of all, full disclosure, I'm trying to be as objective as possible, but I do work for Upbound. I do work with Crossplane. So take what I'm going to say as with a grain of salt, if you wish. But how much a dev should know about infrastructure depends on the developer, on the team, and so on and so forth, right? What I cannot tell you how much devs should know about infrastructure. What I can tell you is that developers should not know everything that there is to know, let's say, about AWS or Azure or Google Cloud or on-prem, whatever you're using. Oh, there is another subscribe. Thank you, Philip. Because that would mean that developers would need to stop whatever they're doing and spend kind of a couple of years learning, right? It takes a lot. So it's really the job of operations or sysadmins or SREs or DevOps or whatever you call yourself these days to figure out with developers, what do you care about, right? Let's say that if you want to enable developers, and you should, to manage their own clusters, let's say Kubernetes clusters, right? So it's all about conversation. Hey, what do you care about? I want to give you a freedom, but only for the things you care about, and forget about the rest. And then starts the conversation. What do you care about? The size of the nodes. Excellent. Okay, written down. Do you care about Kubernetes version? Yes or no? Do you care about subnets? Yes or no? Do you care about VPCs? Yes or no? Right? And then once you figure out what they care about, you create a service that they can consume. Right? You enable them to think about the things they care about and hide the things that they don't. Like, hey, do you care whether it's zonal or regional cluster? If the answer is no, then you implement that, bake that in, don't expose it. So I'm really huge fan of enabling developers to manage their own infrastructure by creating services for them. Because AWS, and I'm using AWS as an example, the same applies to everything else. They're more building blocks than the end solution for the users. And if you're an SRE or ops or whatever, then your users are developers. And you cannot create a product for a user without asking a user what you need. And that doesn't matter whether a user is a developer or a user is somebody outside of your company. When you're developing a front-end, back-end application, whatever, you need to know what users need. So basically, you fulfill those needs by creating services. Whatever format, I'm not entering even into the tools, right? Every single tool in the market allows you one way or another to create abstractions that will allow you to allow others to consume things as some sort of a service, right? Whatever we define as a service. Every single tool.
Well,
some better than
I'd like to add
others.
Small things to what you just said. I completely agree with this one. First, again, I don't want to explain how this can be done in Terraform because it's kind of irrelevant. As Victor said, tools have all possibilities. Cloud providers give you infinite amount of combinations. What I'd like to see us, and well, that's kind of what I'm really looking forward, and I'm working on this kind of myself. is we are in the situation where in order to implement something what your developers need, we're missing in a lot of different tools. For example, when we add or when we edit our configuration in text editor, it is far from what we actually can have. And the rise of different tools like GitHub Codespaces or Visual Studio Extension is just the beginning of what we will see in order to simplify your incoming requests for certain pieces of infrastructure or services or another kind of things. So I'm really excited to see this happening, and well, we'll see. Do you plan to do Pulumi repository with examples as you do with Terraform? Well, I don't think I did anything like examples of Terraform. The thing which I do is I have Terraform AWS modules repositories where I show how certain piece of infrastructure or certain piece of module can be utilized. And in many situations, there are really a lot of examples. Like talking about just AWS Lambda functions, there are, I think, about 80 different combinations which I show. So I really spin up a lot of different Lambda functions in many different configurations. For Pulumi, well, maybe we will have something in the near future. It will be more about contribution to the Pulumi registry or Pulumi catalog. But again, it's a bit too early to say. I'd like to see Pulumi doing a great job and allowing people to reuse it. So registry for me seems to be quite natural step then. But I don't have any plans to do this myself just because I want. Well, I have other interesting things to do.
I think that we are finished. We are over the time. It was a great session. Thank you, Anton, for joining.
Well, thank you for inviting. You know where to find me.
Yeah. We should post. You should. I think that I have it in description, but just in case I don't, maybe you should post the link to the to your channel, because everybody should check it. If you're into Terraform, you should definitely check Anton's channel.
Well, I cannot put links into description, so you guys have to.
We'll put it in the description.
Have to go to Google and type, let's say, your weekly dose of Terraform is the name of my channel on YouTube, or you can go to weekly.tf and subscribe to Terraform weekly newsletter, because a lot of things is happening in this in Terraform in general. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Anton, for being here. See you 2 weeks from now, every 2 weeks.
Great.